I've summarized this story problem, starting off with X is going to represent the area for the flowers and Y is going to represent the area used by the gardener for the vegetables. I called them the veg. And one of the statements that we have is that the gardener will use 220 square feet for planting flowers and vegetables. So if we take the flowers and the vegetables and add them together, we want it to be at most 220. Can't go over 220 because that's the amount of space that's available. So I'm going to say X plus Y is going to stay under or equal to, less than or equal to 220. Ultimately, we're going to be shading the region that corresponds to the values that satisfy the requirements. So I'm going to graph this inequality, and I'm going to have to graph one more inequality as well. But just taking it one step at a time, if you want to graph this inequality, then really you're going to start off by graphing this as if it was a line. So I have X plus Y equals 220. To graph any line, you need 2 points to connect the dots. So you're going to pick a number and substitute it in. I decided to pick X equals 0. So if I come in and I replace the X with 0 and solve, I find out that Y is 220. And so I end up with the point 0, 220. I need to pick another number and substitute it into my equation to get a point. And I went with Y equals 0. If I substitute 0 in for the Y, I find out that the X is 220. So I have another point. And now I'm ready to start my graph. And I've just done this quickly here. If I plot the point right 0 up 220, I'm right there. And then I plot the point right 220 up 0, plot that point there. I drew in a solid line. Remember with inequalities, if it's an underline, it's a solid line. If it's not underlined, this would be a dashed line. I need to decide where I should shade. So when you're making that decision for inequalities, you should test a point. You can test any point you want that's above or below this line. I'm going to go with testing out 0, 0. So if I put 0, 0 into my inequality here, then I end up with 0 for the X, 0 for the Y, 0 plus 0 is less than or equal to 220, and 0 is less than or equal to 220. So since that's true, that means that 0, 0, the point 0, 0, should be included in the shading. So if 0, 0 is in the shading, that means I need to shade this direction here. Okay, so let's go ahead and shade that direction. Okay, so I'm just shading this way. The next statement in the story problem was that this gardener wants the area for the vegetables to be at least 3 times the area of the flowers. Okay, so for my inequality, if you think about which one is more, the area of the vegetables is going to be at least 3 times. So it's going to be the one, vegetables is going to be the one that is going to be more. So the alligator eats the big one. So my vegetables was Y. And then 3 times the flowers, 3 times X. And this side here, we want the vegetables to be at least. So it means bigger than or equal to. So we're going to eat that guy. Okay, let's graph this inequality. So to graph it, we're going to pretend this is an equal sign at first, so Y equals 3X. To graph a line, you want to plot 2 points. So I let my X be 0, substituted that in. 3 times 0 is 0, which gives me the point 0, 0. Okay, pick another number. So I let X be 40. If I substitute in 40, 3 multiplied by 40 is 120. So I have the coordinate 40, 120. Okay, let's graph that. So 0, 0 is here, and 40, 120, right? 40 up 120 is here. when I draw in this line, because this is underlined, I'm going to use a solid line. If it was not underlined, like maybe it says at most, then well, even at most I guess would be okay. But anyways, if it's not underlined, then we'd have a dashed line. Decide if I should shade this direction or this direction. I can't use 0, 0 as my test point this time because it's on the graph. So I need to pick another point to test. I'm going to go with 80, 20. 80, 20 is right here. I'm just randomly picking a point that's clearly on one side or the other to see if it's true or not. When I substitute in 80, 20, right, the 20 goes in for the y, and the 80 in for the x. 3 times 80 is 240. 20 is greater than or equal to 240. That is not true. So since that's not true, then the coordinate 80, 20 should not be in the shaded region. So if this point isn't in the shaded, I need to shade this direction. Okay, so here's, whoops, my bad. Okay, so I want to shade this way. Okay, so I'm shading this way. And then finally, I'm going to put the two of them together. So the points in this purple shaded region, those are the points that make this one true. So this direction. The points in the gray shaded make that first one true. And we want points that make both of them true. So that's going to be in the overlap. But what's a little bit different in this story problem is you can't have a negative area for the flower garden or for the vegetables. So we need to stay in quadrant 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in this extra line because I'm bounding that. I can't have negative x's. Now technically I also can't have negative y values either, so I could bound it down this way. And so the true overlap, if I stay in quadrant 1 to keep the area positive, is going to end up being this little shaded triangle in there. So every point that's on the solid line or in the shaded region makes the original true. I know this is going to make it a little bit longer, but I think you better have one more quick example. I'll try to go very quickly on this one. To summarize the story problem, there's a person working out. Sometimes they do cardio and sometimes they do weights. And it says in the story problem that they exercise at least 9 hours. Well, they're doing two types of exercise. They're doing the cardio and the weights. So if we add those together, if you are at least 9 hours, you're going to work out 9 or more hours. So this is bigger than 9 hours, but 9 hours is also okay to be at least 9 hours. So we've got our inequality. Then I'm going to graph the line as if it has an equal sign. You pick a number, plug it in, get an answer, pick a number, plug it in, get an answer, and plot those 2 points. Once you've plotted those 2 points, write 0 up 9, write 9 up 0. I need to figure out where to shade so you can test a number. I picked 0, 0. 0 plus 0 is greater than or less than or equal to 9. 0 is less than or equal to 9. So yes, that's true. So I'm going to end up shading to include 0, 0. The next statement in this one said that the person working out worked out at most 5 hours on cardio. So the cardio is the X value. So if it's at most 5, we need to stay under or equal to 5, less than or equal to 5. Graphing this particular one, Remember, when you graph an x, it's going to slice through the x-axis, specifically here at 5, and to stay less than or equal to, on the x-axis, numbers are smaller to the left, so less than is going to shade this direction over here. And then a third statement was the person working out was at most 7 hours on weights, and so the weights was the y. And so at most, they've got to stay at or under 7 hours. So this one's going to be smaller than or equal to 7. When you graph a y, it's going to slice through the y-axis, specifically here at 7. Both of these are solid lines because they were underlined. And if they weren't underlined, then it would be dashed. And then less than, when you're going this way on the y-axis, underneath is smaller and above is bigger. So if I want to use shade for the less than, I'm going to go with this way. And then finally, I've got to put all 3 of these together. But keep in mind, again, on all these story problems, we're going to be in quadrant 1 because you can't work out a negative amount of hours. So when I go to put in the overlap, I put all 3 of those together, it starts bleeding into the other quadrants. And so I need to stay above the x-axis and to the right of the y-axis. So my final answer, where all 3 overlap, is right there.